Have you ever wanted to experience Sekiro-style pairing combat in a Metroidvania game? Or a world where alien technology meets traditional Eastern mythology, all warped in a unique style the developers call Taopunk, a fusion of cyberpunk and Taoism? If so, I welcome you to the captivating universe of Nine Souls. Our journey begins with our main character Yi, barely clinging to an edge of a cliff, bloodied and exhausted. In front of him stands a masked woman who we can only assume is responsible for his wounds. He loses his grip and falls into a pit where strange roots twist and turn around his body, eventually pulling him in. The next thing we know, Yi is awakened by a small child playing a flute. The child, named Xuan, is one of many recurring characters in this game. The actual gameplay begins in a small cave where we're introduced to the basic mechanics: moving, jumping, attacking, grappling, and our first quest. Xuan asks us if we can fetch a crimson hibiscus for him for a special ceremony he has tomorrow. We get the hibiscus by fighting a boar, which is also our first enemy, and upon returning to Xuan, we learn that some time has passed since the initial cutscene, about 2 years to be exact, at least according to Xuan, who mentioned that he arrived in their village about 2 years ago. We meet up with Xuan and have dinner before the big day of the ceremony. Tomorrow, as Yi leaves the house, he receives a transmission from a robot named Rui, which warns Yi about the guards being on low alert and how triggering the alarms could cause significant problems. This cryptic message sets a strange tone for what was supposed to be a happy little ceremony, but still, let's go see what the ceremony is about. And just like that, the atmosphere shifts dramatically, from happy and cheerful to incredibly dark. We realize that the whole village is a lie, and the ceremony that everyone was so excited about is actually a means to sacrifice people. As we descend into the man-sacrificing altar, we're introduced to the rest of the mechanics: parrying, talisman detonation, which is a form of like an execute, healing, dashing, hacking, and save points. This part of the game took me by surprise. I went into the game not knowing anything about it, not even watching the trailers, so I expected it to be set in some sort of ancient Asian setting, but instead it is set in a cruel futuristic environment where entire villages live in simulations and people are harvested like animals. After making my way through the underground facility, I set my eyes on a wondrous tree made entirely of roots, with massive machinery designed to fully utilize the energy those roots provide. While observing the tree, we receive our main objective of the game: obtaining the Council Code, which can be only acquired by collecting all 9 souls. It's similar to collecting the souls of Lords of Cinder in Dark Souls 3, for example. I make my way to the Four Season Pavilion, which is nearby, a safe zone that is initially engulfed in darkness and far from feeling secure. However, it soon transforms into a welcoming hub area to which I can always return. Here I encounter Rui, who is revealed to be a giant supercomputer and will be our main guide throughout the game. In the safe zone, you also come into a contact with a mysterious figure who will give you the ability to travel from any outer node, which are the save points, directly to the Four Seasons Pavilion. With Yi's newfound transportation abilities, the hunt for the 9 souls begins. Each of the 9 souls resides in a distinct zone, each with its own purpose and design, which I will detail one by one. Our first target is the Soul of Equality carried by Lady Goumang, located in the agricultural district. You enter this zone after being ensnared by Goumang and dropped down an elevator. Upon awakening, you find yourself in a lush greenhouse teeming with unusual plants such as fishcorn, eye berries, and heart-shaped plants with pig noses. This zone is primarily responsible for providing food to the all of New Kunlun, which is this game's world. Additionally, it is focused on genetically modifying and crossbreeding plants to create species that can be harvested multiple times a day. While some may view this practice as cruel and unhealthy, Lady Goumang's methods are deemed necessary to sustain the population of New Kunlun. However, Lady Goumang is far from benevolent. She deceives people for her beliefs, believing herself to be superior. She even employs transmutation techniques that are seen as unhumane to enslave others for all eternities. And that's exactly why we need to defeat her. So now let's shift our focus to combat, which is this game's strongest feature. This boss fight is a multi-enemy encounter reminiscent of Ornstein and Smoke from Dark Souls 1, featuring one large slow enemy and one small fast enemy. Many games struggle with multi-enemy boss fights, but 9 Souls executes it nearly flawlessly. When you defeat one of the 2 Jiangshi soldiers, Lady Goumang will descend and ring her bell to revive the fallen soldier. During this brief window, you have a few seconds to inflict as much damage as possible. Once both soldiers are revived, she flies away and you must repeat the process. Upon finally defeating the boss, the game's darker elements become apparent once more. Instead of merely killing her, we sever her legs and subjugate her to the same mind-controlling device she used on others. After punishing her, we proceed to her vital sanctum where her soul resides. Beside holding the soul of bosses, vital sanctums also reveal the backstory and motivation behind the boss's actions. This is the game's attempt to humanize and justify the decisions made by certain bosses. For instance, Lady Goumang came from poverty and spent most of her childhood poor and hungry. This background fueled her desire to ensure that everyone around her was always fed so no one would have to experience the hardships she did. However, despite her noble intentions, her methods of enslaving people and using mind-controlling devices remain unjustifiable. And with that, the first of the 9 souls is collected. The next soul on our list is Soul Seal of Loyalty, held by the renowned engineer Kuafu. He is located in the Power Reservoir district in New Kunlun. This area is a stark contrast to the greenhouse we were just in. There isn't a single plant in this area, not a drop of water, just cold, unyielding machinery. Yet, as you pass by hundreds of prismatic columns, you can see a form of beauty closely resembling brutalist architecture. This area's main purpose is to provide energy to the whole of New Kunlun by storing and maintaining prismatic energy provided by the primordial roots. All this is managed inside the main power facility called the Radiant Pagoda, where the soul of this area resides. Just like Lady Goumang, we won't be fighting the soul in this area directly, but rather one of his soldiers. In this case, we will be fighting General Ying Zhao, a giant mechanical centaur. Despite how intimidating this boss looks, his moveset is quite simple. In total, he has around 4 combos which are easily parryable, and even in his second phase when he charges up, his moveset doesn't change that much. After defeating the boss, you meet the soul in charge of this area. The interaction is quite different from what we had with Lady Goumang. Instead of being aggressive, Kuafu is delighted to see Yi, calling him his friend and brother. He even has little plushies of himself and Yi sitting in the background. However, Yi is not one to trust people easily, especially not members of the council. He asks Kuafu if he is with the council. Although Kuafu is technically working for them, he never wanted to see Yi hurt and stayed with them only because he didn't have anywhere else to go. And for that reason, Yi couldn't bring himself to harm Kuafu either. Instead of fighting him, Kuafu willingly hands his soul to Yi and agrees to help him in his fight against the council by becoming his personal engineer. In Kuafu's vital sanctum, we learn that his motivations for joining the council were quite wholesome and simple. All he ever wanted was to help his people and spend more time with his friends. Upon receiving Kuafu's soul, Kuafu becomes a permanent member of the Four Seasons Pavilion. When you interact with him there, he provides Yi with the Azure Bow, Yi's treasured family item. This versatile weapon allows Yi to attack enemies from afar and also pierces them, making it excellent for fighting multiple foes at once. Additionally, the arrows can also be changed depending on the situation and the enemy, enhancing its utility. The next soul on our list is the Soul Seal of Legacy, carried by Yanlao and located in the Warehouse District. From the moment you enter this area, Yanlao will constantly keep an eye on you and will try to convince you to lay down your arms. He will try to preach the virtues of forgetting and forgiving, desperately trying to settle things without violence. He even attempts to get on your good side, acknowledging your reasons for revenge and validating your actions. However, this is all a facade. Yanlao is not avoiding conflict out of moral obligation, nor because he is your friend like Kuafu, but because he is scared. He's old and he's dying, and fighting him would mean certain death for him. But before we get to his predestined demise, let's talk about this area. Unlike the previous zones, Yanlao's area focuses more on platforming aspects of the game rather than combat. This zone is filled with moving crates, lasers, and traps that you must traverse to reach the boss. This area is quite a breath of fresh air compared to the previous areas and those that are yet to come. In the terms of design though, it is very similar to Kuafu's district, featuring a plethora of machines with a dark blue color scheme. Once you navigate through the area and activate both generators, you will be able to descend into the deeper parts of the warehouse, where you will find Yanlao. He will be in the middle of activating some contraption. He will try to buy time by sharing old sayings and talking about his father's old music records. Surprisingly, despite how smart Yi is, he still falls for this scheme, giving Yanlao enough time to activate an ancient robotic weapon, Xin Tian. This boss is actually more of a mini-boss before the actual boss fight with the soul. It is relatively slow and predictable, making it one of the few bosses I managed to defeat on my first attempt. The only gimmick with this boss is that he tries to heal himself, and you need to place a talisman on him to stop him from healing. After defeating this weapon, Yanlao realizes that there is no stopping you, but he still refuses to wait and die. He activates a giant sniper weapon, initiating one of the only chase sequences in the game. You must navigate throughout the last part of this area, while Yanlao attempts to kill you with his sniper. However, this sequence is somewhat underwhelming, as the time it takes for him to shoot is excessive, and even if you get hit, it doesn't result in an insta-kill. Despite how lackluster the chase sequence is, the actual boss fight is nothing to scoff at. Yanlao, in a last desperate attempt, uses the last of his strength to connect his consciousness to the computer, activating his ultimate weapon, a giant crane game machine claw. This is one of the more challenging bosses in the game, featuring a plethora of both range and melee attacks along with additional aerial hazards in forms of lasers. After you defeat the claw, instead of destroying it, you actually hack it and use it for yourself to bust a hole through a wall to reach Yanlao. However, by the time you get to him, his body has been already put through so much stress that he simply falls from his chair and dies. In his vital sanctum, we learned that he never actually had a strong motivation for this job when he was young. From a very young age, he was forced by his father to take care of antiques and historical artifacts, and it wasn't until Eigong showed up that he truly began to appreciate these things. Right after you defeat Yanlao, you can't even catch a break as Jiequan, Soul Seal of Discipline, contacts you immediately afterwards. Disturbed by all the commotion you are causing around New Kunlun, he offers to save you time searching for him by giving you his exact location and inviting you to a duel in the transmutation factory. Yi of course doesn't deny this offer as he's in a hurry to find all the souls and he heads straight to the factory. Yi meets up with Jiequan for their duel, but instead of a duel, Yi is hit with a overcharged electric shock that instantly knocks him out. When he regains his consciousness, Yi finds himself trapped in a torture device being electrocuted by Jiequan. He informs Yi that his mentor and the head of the council is currently missing, so the meeting about Yi's disturbance has to wait. However, this doesn't really bother him, as that gives him just more time to torture Yi. When Jiequan finally retires to his chambers, your nymph pops out and releases you from the torture device. But you're still not free. You're in this dark area, and after all that torture, Yi is unable to dash, run, or jump properly. Combine that with your health being halved, and nearly unkillable enemies that teleport near you if alerted, and you got a recipe for an area that is focused primarily on stealth. To me, this is one of the less enjoyable areas in the game, because it forces you to use stealth, denying you the use of the game's best aspect, the combat. Fortunately for us, this doesn't last long, as you quickly find a root node that restores all your health and abilities. After your abilities have been restored, you encounter the boss of this area, the Kangui, a beast-like cat exploited for his summoning abilities. After you defeat him, you perform a merciful act by executing the beast and granting him his freedom. After this, you are once again granted access to the transmutation factory. The factory is hands down the area with the most enemies in the game, which makes sense since all the soldiers you fight throughout the game are being made here by transmutating the flesh of the ape-men like Xuanxuan. This transmutation leads to the factory having a lot of concentrated heat, which is released as radioactive high-pressured gas. After you traverse throughout the entire factory killing countless enemies, you are rewarded with a short cutscene of Jiequan, naked and talking to a mysterious figure that we will talk about later in the video. He then steps inside his transmutation chamber to regain his lost strength as his muscles have stagnated over the past 500 years that he has been sleeping. Unfortunately for him, his healing session is cut short as Yi stumbles upon him and opens up his transmutation pot. After a short conversation with him, the duel that has been promised to you starts. Jiequan is definitely one of the most difficult bosses in the game and my second favorite. He is depicted as much more muscular than other Solarians and his design is by far my favorite in the game. Even Kuafu compliments him on his looks. In terms of combat, he is also nearly perfect. His arsenal of weapons is vast, but he primarily uses polearms like Yanlao. Just like in real life, polearms have extremely long range, so running is not an option. You are always better off trying to parry his attacks, even if you are low health. He's also extremely fast and leaves little room for healing when he is attacking, especially in his second phase, where he gains the ability to teleport. Your best chance to heal is when he jumps back and also attempts to heal. When you finally defeat him, you are not even granted the satisfaction of killing him, because in his last attempt to get stronger, he drinks the entire teapot he was using to heal himself, and instead of making him stronger, it melts his body from the inside, turning him into a pile of flesh and fur. After defeating him, you are granted access to his vital sanctum, where you find out about his past and motivations. His motivation for becoming a member of the council was to bring honor back to his kingdom. To gain the strength he needed to realize his ambitions, he used the forbidden act of transmutation on his own body, putting himself through unthinkable amounts of pain. And ironically, the very thing that granted him all that strength was the thing that killed him in the end. With Jiequan's defeat and his backstory revealed, we come to understand the complex motivation driving each of the souls. Now, as we move forward, it's time to shift our focus away from the epic battles to the vibrant world of NPCs and characters that populate this universe. In Nine Souls, there is not a lot of NPCs that you can talk to, but the 6 that you have in the 4-season pavilion provide more than enough dialogue, and once you start interacting with every character, you realize that Nine Souls is a very dialogue-heavy game. The first NPC that will join you in the save zone is Xuan. He will join you immediately after you enter the save zone for the first time. Xuan is an ape-man child to whom you can bring various items you find while exploring. Each item triggers different interactions, and some items even change how the 4-season pavilion looks. For example, if you bring Xuan a seed from the agricultural district and 2 fertilizers, he will grow a giant tree that will give you access to the 2 hidden chests on top of the save zone. If you give him sheet music, he will learn to play the flute and decipher a message in the music that helps you complete the bell puzzle. By giving him a Tianhao Academy periodical, he will learn how to code and create a device that lets you manipulate the day and night cycles within the 4-season pavilion. If you provide him with a multi-tool kit, he and Kuafu will make a sofa where you can sit and relax. Some items are even connected. For instance, if you give him the Kunlun Immortal Portrait and the 4 treasures of the study, he will learn how to paint and replicate the painting. While replicating the Immortal Portrait, Xuan and the robot Abacus will find a secret message hidden within the portrait, leading you to a treasure. And that's only the beginning. There are so many items that you can bring to him, and with each one, Xuan will learn new things, resulting in Pavilion changing ever so more, from empty to full of various items, making it feel more alive. Xuan is probably the character that you will have the most interactions with, but he is not the only ape-man that will inhabit the safe zone. There is also Shannon, the Peach Village pariah, whom you first meet at the beginning of the game. The next time you see him, he will be in the agricultural district, choking and asking you to bring him something poisonous. Although this might seem a bit counterintuitive, you will find out that Shannon's body is immune to poison. Because of this, he can make a special brew that enhances one's vitality by processing the poisonous items within his body, a rather disgusting process. However, even though it is disgusting, if you want the highest possible maximum HP, you must endure some things. Throughout the game, he is depicted as a hot-headed hypocrite, constantly saying how he dislikes the villagers for being naive and that he does not want to see them ever again. However, when Jiequan attacked the village, he asked you to protect it, and the next time village is attacked, he even risked his own life to save them. By the end of the story, when the village leader dies, Shannon is declared the new village leader, which he accepts and promises to protect the villagers until his death. But he is not the only one that cares for other people. Shio the merchant also cares deeply for his loved ones. Your first encounter with him occurs in the agricultural district, where he introduces himself as a peaceful merchant with a big love for Jin, this game's currency. Aside from being a merchant, he is also an ancient organic weapon that has somehow gained sentience. His mission throughout the game is to save his brother, who is still being used as a mindless weapon by one of the souls. You will meet his brother before the Yanlao fight, where you will have to cut his head off. When you tell this tragic news to Shio, he is unbothered, as his species can survive blows that would be lethal to others. Shio is determined to free his brother, and by freeing him, he means killing him permanently, because for Shio, living without freedom is not living at all, and he believes it is better to die than to walk and fight mindlessly. In his righteous crusade, he needs Yi's help, and you assist him by collecting various special weapons throughout the game and giving him a lot of money. In exchange for your help and money, he will provide you with powerful jades, which is this game's talisman system, and various poisonous items that will increase your maximum HP. Other than Shio, you can also spend your money with your good friend Kuafu. After taking Kuafu's soul, he will move to the Four Season Pavilion, where he will help Yi by upgrading your tools and making new weapons. He also helps Xuan with many of his projects, even though, at the beginning, he says that he can't stand the thought of an ape man living with him. But Xuan's likable and curious nature quickly wins Kuafu over, and the two of them quickly become close. Additionally, next to all these wonderful NPCs, there are some minor ones, such as the broken assistive robot Shanghai 9000, who will provide you with detailed maps if you bring him copies from other robots like him. You can get copies by buying them for 800 Jin, or taking them by force. There is also Abacus, Yi's dedicated personal assistant, who will contact you throughout the game to inform you about the location and bosses you will encounter. In Nine Souls, the NPCs are more than just background characters. They play a crucial role in enriching the narrative and providing assistance and lore that deepen our understanding of New Kunlun. Now armed with new gear and determination, it's time to continue our pursuit of the remaining souls. Next on our list is the Soul of Benevolence carried by Lady Ethereal in the Soulscape Sanctum. You will most likely stumble upon this area very early, and if you're like me, you'll be taken back when this scripted scene happens. For a while, there will be nothing for you to do here, but after defeating Jiequan, and when you return once again into this area, you will find a ceremonial door that will transport you into the Soulscape system. Once you enter, your mystic nymph is trapped, and you come face to face with Lady Ethereal. She won't recognize you at first, and won't even talk to you until you take a bath. In the bath, Yi demands her soul, but she starts talking nonsense about how beautiful the sun is and how water shimmers with radiance, and how all her friends are here to enjoy it. But you don't see anyone here. When confronted about her imaginary friends, she spirals further into delirium. So you leave her to her insanity and go your own way. Throughout this area there will be barely any enemies, and instead you will be required to do a lot of platforming to reach the end. But when you start the platforming segment, you notice something strange. Bubbles of darkness appear that transform the background from lush mountains to dark and uncanny landscapes. When you reach the end of the first segment, you find yourself back where you started, next to Lady Ethereal, and now all her so-called friends are here, but something feels off. You continue encountering more disturbing things each time you circle back to her, and each time more and more of her friends act weird, and the atmosphere grows more unsettling. Finally, she admits to having nightmares and strange wounds, and eventually she says she feels uncomfortable talking to you, so you leave. A new mechanic is introduced to platforming at this point, a strange flower that lets you change the area that you're standing in into the dark version of itself. And I quickly realized there's something sinister at play, So I wanted to see what the dark version of Lady Ethereal looks like, and to my surprise she didn't change at all, but her friends sure did. Returning to Lady Ethereal once more, you see her friends acting strangely and blaming her for something. When you talk to her, she confesses that she killed them all and deserves punishment. So you strike her until she transforms into the dark version of herself and teleports away. With this, you are granted exit from this place, and upon leaving, you see it for what it truly is, a giant storage where thousands of Solarians sleep eternally. Even though you just came out of this nightmarish place, to get the soul of Lady Ethereal, you need to go back. Upon returning, you get an explanation for the existence of this nightmarish place. The Soulscape system was developed by Lady Ethereal as a safe haven where Solarians could stay while the New Kunlun research team found a cure for a deadly disease that was spreading on their home planet. When individuals enter the Soulscape chamber, they are put to sleep and experience blissful dreams until someone or something from the outside wakes them up. And the system was perfect. Too perfect. The people experienced pure bliss in the Soulscape, and when they woke up, they immediately started killing them, realizing how much better the dream was compared to real life. But still, the disaster to come could have still been prevented at this point. When it came to presenting each soul's invention, Lady Ethereal lied, dooming 100,000 Solarians by saying there was no problem with the Soulscape system. She blamed herself and Yi for all of this, because she was the one that made the Soulscape, but he was the one who recruited her for the council, ultimately leading her down this path. But now it's too late, and Lady Ethereal is far too delusional to be saved. Despite all this suffering, at least one thing remains: the epic 3-phase Lady Ethereal boss fight, which also happens to be my third favorite boss fight in the game. Each time you defeat Lady Ethereal, she summons more and more copies of herself to attack you, which proves to be quite a challenge. But, just like all dreams and nightmares, this one has to end too. At the end, she at least gets to see all of her colleagues for the last time before dying. And with that, another soul has been conquered. Our next soul is someone we've actually encountered a few times before, most notably before Yanlao, where he exalted the beauty of this place, and again in the Jiequan arena. You might wonder now how these two could be the same person. Well, just as before, wait and you'll see. You encounter him once more just before entering his zone, where you learn more about him. He has been alive for decades now and possesses mystical powers that allow him to see the future. But most importantly, you discover he is Ji, the Soul Seal of Insight. This whole area is one of the oldest in New Kunlun and is steeped in Solarian history. You traverse through this zone filled with many traps left by the past civilizations, finding all kinds of relics of the past until you meet up with Ji in his royal quarters, where for centuries now he has been writing down all the events of the past, all the way from the first era that Solarians lived in. As we delve into the past of this area, we'll uncover the origins, triumphs, and tragedies that have shaped this ancient civilization into what it is today. It all begins on a planet named Penglai, where a sentient race of Solarians lived in harmony with the primordial roots, also known as Fusang. The primordial roots were the first plant to emerge on Penglai, and where they appeared, life prospered. These ancient roots were brimming with energy that they absorbed from the sun, as depicted in this ancient cave painting. Solarians worshipped the roots as they provided shelter. They cultivated the roots and expanded their civilization throughout the entire Penglai. Soon Solarians spread to every corner of Penglai, forming factions that evolved into the first 9 kingdoms, marking the start of the Age of Development. Each of the 9 kingdoms flourished in their own way during the Age of Development, except for one, the Jie Kingdom, which was frequently looked down upon as they lived in a desolate wasteland, surviving purely of mining the desert's rich ore deposits of Jin and Azure sand. Over a long period of time, the other 8 kingdoms have used up all their resources, and a high demand for Jin and Azure sand gave the Jie Kingdom the financial leverage it needed. During this time, the turbulent era has started, and Emperor Jiequan has decided to make a change for his own nation. He leveraged this material wealth to build a new weapon system and advanced transmutation technology. Finally, after years of being belittled, the Jie Kingdom gained the power they so desperately wanted. They started launching military campaigns to expand their territory, and shortly, they became Penglai's strongest military superpower. The Jie Kingdom perfected genetic and biological transmutation to create the Jiangshi soldiers, which are actually a real thing in Chinese folklore, mostly known as Chinese versions of zombies and vampires. These Jiangshi soldiers felt no pain, no fear, and they never deserted the battlefields, enabling the Jie Kingdom to win many wars, but also sparking a public backlash against the king, as many civilians were abducted and transmutated to create these soldiers. During the turbulent era, a religious counter-movement emerged, with Solarians looking to the past for peace and finding it in Taoism. This religion worshipped the great Fusang and believed that the primordial roots were connected to the universe's creation. Members of Taoism sought the end to the turbulent era, but were few in numbers and powerless to stop the Jie Kingdom. During this time, the Jie Kingdom continued advancing their military power, creating the first rhizomatic columns to meet their military's new power demands. All this power that they were creating was needed to fuel the most advanced and destructive weapon on Penglai, the Haoshin Sphere. With this weapon, Emperor Jiequan intended to end all wars and become one true leader of Penglai. He aimed to create a Haoshin Sphere, powered by countless rhizomatic columns and equipped with rhizomatic cannons capable of leveling entire nations. Finally, as almost all hope was lost, a brilliant Solarian named Lear decided to challenge the Jie Kingdom. His genius and ideas attracted great scholars from all over Penglai, leading to the creation of an international scientific alliance and the founding of the Fuxi Guild. The Fuxi scientists, pacifists at heart, opposed the Jie Kingdom's reign of war. They spread their influence and ideas throughout the 9 kingdoms, hoping to form an alliance to stop the Jie Kingdom. However, when the peace treaty was presented to the Jie Kingdom, they refused it, prompting the Fuxi Guild to respond with their own military power. Despite countless defeats, the Jie Kingdom continued developing the Haoshin Sphere. The Fuxi scientists, in fear, developed their own explosive weapon, mirroring the real-life race for the atomic bomb between America and Germany during the World War II. The race was won by the Fuxi Guild with the creation of a rhizomatic bomb, a tiny bomb capable of razing an entire island. It is said to have been the final straw that broke the Jie Kingdom. With the end of the turbulent era, Solarians could once again focus on improving their lives and technology rather than war. The previously destructive Haoshin Sphere was transformed into an object of advancement. Its cannons were replaced with telescopes, helping the Solarian race better understand the vastness of space. The Fuxi Guild returned to research, opening schools throughout Penglai and establishing a giant campus on the island of Kunlun. Kunlun soon became the heart of science, knowledge, and innovation during the following era, and Solarians developed into a technological democracy led by the Fuxi Guild. With rapid technological progress, the Solarian race soon achieved what some might call perfection. Genetically modified plants provided enough food for everyone, and perfection of the absorption and consumption of rhizomatic energy provided almost unlimited energy supplies. However, many saw this era as one where Solarians grew weak-minded and greedy, no longer appreciating the simplicity of life, as they now thought they were beyond that. Thus, Taoism spread once again throughout the 9 kingdoms, with people returning to simplicity. Taoism gained its most distinguished member in Lear, the founder of the Fuxi Guild and a renowned scientist, who concluded that science weakened Solarian spirits rather than strengthening them. In an incomprehensible declaration, Lear ordered all Fuxi technology to be banned of Penglai and gathered up on Kunlun, after which he isolated Kunlun from the rest of the world. He disbanded the Fuxi Guild soon after, closing their schools and fully converted to Taoism, bringing the Origin Era. During the Origin Era, inventions from the previous era were forgotten and shunned. Transmutation and genetically modified food were replaced with regular farming, and the need for rhizomatic energy vanished, leaving the rhizomatic columns to rust as relics of the past. Over the centuries, Lear and the co-founders of the Fuxi Guild became known as the Three Wise Sages. Kunlun, once closed to the public, was reopened at the peak of Taoism, not for scientific purposes, but as a place of worship, a holy site where people shifted their beliefs from Fusang to Lear. But as with the previous era, when Taoism reached its peak, many felt that the belief system weakened Solarians, and the only path to strength and prosperity was through science. These Solarians, the futurists, believed that spirituality is nothing more than a superstition and rather focused on the previous era where technology thrived. Secret scientific organization emerged throughout the Nine Kingdoms, and a brilliant scientist named Eigong appeared. Like Lear in the past, she was a futurist with the ultimate goal of achieving what Lear could not, the transcendence of the Solarian race into a new evolution, free from disease, hunger, and death. Eigong founded the Yanlao Research Institute, where she could pursue her experiments on immortality. This organization operated in secret for many years due to the predominantly Taoist culture. In Origin Era, year 434, Eigong's research stalled, and under pressure from the council she created, she decided to dedicate the rest of her time to pursuit of immortality. Decades later, Eigong discovered that Fusang and Solarians were closely linked with DNA from the primordial roots found in the Solarian genome. She saw this discovery as a significant advancement towards the immortality. However, a mistake during the gene editing process created a deadly contagious virus called the Tianhao. When this virus entered the Solarian bodies, it altered their genetic structure, causing strange fungal growths to appear. When the victims succumbed to the virus, a flower blossomed from their corpse, allowing the virus to propagate. The virus soon broke containment, leading to a worldwide pandemic. 4 years later, millions had died, and different beliefs had different perspectives on Tianhao. Taoists saw this as nature's course, a time for Solarians to accept their end and return to the great Tao. Futurists, opposing this idea, sought solace in action, desperately trying to find a cure for the virus. In this desperate moment, science seized the opportunity, proclaiming itself as the only way to fight the virus, gaining immense support. The Kunlun Island, previously a holy site, transformed into New Kunlun, a Tianhao research center. Solarians looked to science as their only hope, unaware that science was responsible for the virus's creation in the first place. In the midst of this chaos, a young Solarian named Yi rebels against his purely Taoist family, delving into the scientific research that brings him to start his own experiments with the mystic nymph technology in the hopes of becoming a renowned scientist. During one of the experiments with the mystic nymph, a disaster strikes and Yi together with his sister Heng are caught in an explosion that leaves Yi's organs exposed and nearly kills him. However, for some unknown reason, Heng, Yi's sister, has strong ties with Fusang. She starts crying and the roots of the mystical Fusang start regenerating Yi's body. Due to these events, Yi's body now shares a deep connection with the Fusang that makes his body nearly immortal. These events were brought to Eigong's attention. She saw Yi as a gift from the heavens that would help her make a breakthrough. However, years pass and no significant progress has been made, so Eigong assembles the 9 brightest minds from the 9 kingdoms to aid her research and grant her the time she needs. Yi, now Eigong's pupil, presents a genius idea at one of the meetings with these 9 individuals. The Eternal Cauldron Project. A massive project that could result in the Solarian race being saved from the virus. But for this project to work, some major breakthroughs are needed. The first breakthrough needed was Lady Ethereal's Soulscape and Vital Sanctum Hibernation project to be completed flawlessly. The Vital Sanctum project was necessary to preserve and protect Solarians in cryosleep for hundreds of years until the cure for the virus was found. However, for such an interconnected apparatus to work, a massive biological computational system was needed, something Penglai currently couldn't produce. Fortunately, the second breakthrough solved this problem. The previously mentioned Haoshin sphere, now serving as an observatory, has discovered a planet with highly intelligent life forms called the Ape Men, that could be farmed and used to fuel the Vital Sanctums. Unfortunately, a new problem arises. The planet where Ape Men lived was hundreds of light years away from Penglai. Luckily, Kuafu's third and final breakthrough solved this problem by developing large rhizomatic power reserves connected to the primordial roots. The island of New Kunlun could break away from Penglai and reach the pale blue planet where they could set up a base of operation. For this grand project to succeed, each of the council members were given a seal and an oversight of a specific region of New Kunlun. Now, with all the time she needed, Eigong embarked on a new experiment involving the soul Ji. She discovered that Ji was practically immortal, but different from Yi. Unlike Yi, Ji's cell didn't age. With this ray of hope, she no longer saw the need to experiment with the primordial roots for immortality. With the launch of New Kunlun, a new era began, the era of Foundation. 100,000 of the most skilled and privileged Solarians aboard New Kunlun, and the rest of the race is unfortunately left to fend for themselves against the deadly virus. New Kunlun departs and warps near the pale blue planet, stationing themselves next to the nearest sun so that the primordial roots could generate enough energy to return to Penglai once the cure was found. Livestock pens were soon developed on New Kunlun, and the imprisoned ape men live in simulation of their own world within Peach Blossom Village. Soon they developed a religion, praising the 9 souls as gods, and every 2 years a select few were chosen to live amongst gods, but in reality they were just being harvested for their brains so that the Solarians could survive in their sleeping capsules. The Eternal Cauldron project was now fully active, giving hope to the future of Solarians, but things quickly change when Yi discovers a terrible secret. His mentor, Eigong, was the one responsible for the Tianhao virus. Her greed for the immortality had doomed an entire race to death, which Yi could not forgive. Yi challenged Eigong to a fight, but unfortunately his skills were not enough and he was defeated by her. Morally wounded once again, Yi was saved by the Fusang within him and dragged to safety by the primordial roots, where he spent the next 500 years. Meanwhile, Eigong developed an experimental serum for Tianhao from Ji's blood. She forcefully dragged Solarians into her laboratory to test the serum. Initially, the serum suppressed the virus, and it seemed as if it was a great success. But some individuals developed mutations shortly after being injected and went mad. Eventually, the mutants escaped Eigong's laboratory and started consuming the Fusang, from which they gained regenerative powers such as Yi's. Now, with Ji's ageless cells and Fusang's regenerative abilities, the mutants became truly immortal. With so many failures, Eigong went mad, convincing herself that the mutants were not a failure, but a gift, the next step in Solarian evolution, a truly immortal species. And so with that, Yi awakens from his slumber 500 years later, and the events of the game begin, bringing us back here. For one of the later game bosses, Ji is not very tough. He will mostly use projectiles to attack, which can be more harmful to him because it only serves to fuel your ki. After his defeat, he reveals that he already knew the outcome of this battle when he read your future. He knew he would lose and die here, but he feels no sadness or anger, because for him, immortality was more of a curse than a blessing. In his vital sanctum, we learn that from a very young age he was worshipped as a prophet and didn't face many struggles in life, so even when his immortality ended, he was at peace. Next up, we move to the second to last area of our journey, a stark contrast from the serene and historical grotto of scriptures. Welcome to the Empyrean District, a modern, neon-lit area that exudes the vibrant nightlife ambience, reminiscent of the real-life Golden Guy in Japan. Originally designed as a luxurious relaxation spot for wealthy Solarians, the district has now developed into living hell, overrun by grotesquely mutated Solarians. The Empyrean District is unique from others that it is governed by two souls instead of one, the twins Fuxi and Nuwa, who bear the soul of integrity and selflessness. Hailing from the aristocratic Fang clan, an ancient and affluent family, the twins did not contribute much in terms of knowledge to the council, but rather with their immense wealth. Fuxi, the elder brother, was instrumental in funding the Eternal Cauldron project, almost single-handedly funding it. As you navigate throughout the district, you first encounter Nuwa, who is willing to part with her soul on the condition that you leave the district undisturbed. Yi agrees to these terms, but only if Fuxi also relinquishes his soul. This sets you on a challenging path through hordes of mutants to locate Fuxi's and Nuwa's banquet. When you arrive there, instead of a grand feast, you find a debauched scene of drugs, orgies, and alcohol. In the midst of this chaos are Nuwa and a figure who appears to be Fuxi. Initially, Nuwa is ready to give up her brother's soul, but Fuxi's incoherent mumbling and Nuwa's delusions lead her to believe that you pose a threat to all of New Kunlun. Consequently, you must now fight to obtain the soul. Fuxi reveals himself, unrecognizable from who he once was, heavily infected and grotesquely mutated. The boss battle itself is relatively straightforward, with the giant mutant's slow and predictable moves being easily parried. However, the challenge intensifies in the second phase, when Nuwa joins the fight, summoning giant snakes to aid Fuxi in the battle. Upon defeating Fuxi, his mask falls off, revealing his disfigured face. Yi informs Nuwa that Fuxi has been dead for some time now, but unable to accept this, Nuwa still clings to her delusions. As Fuxi's body mutates one final time, spikes emerge from him, killing Nuwa in the process. In Fuxi's vital sanctum, you discover he has been suffering from Yanlao for a very long time, and the experimental serum was the only thing keeping him alive for over 500 years. The serum is found right next to his vital sanctum, underscoring the tragic dependency on a flawed cure. You bring the newly found serum to Abacus and Kuafu for further research. After analyzing the serum, they discover something intriguing. Instead of being a cure for the Tianhao virus, the serum merely alters its form, resulting in the aforementioned mutations. Now that the origin of the mutants is known, it becomes possible to devise a method to destroy them. However, the only way to produce a cure is to find a Solarian with matching genetic sequence from whose blood the serum was originally made. Finding an individual with a compatible genetic sequence among 100,000 of Solarians seems almost impossible. Fortunately, a clue emerges. The individual whose sample was used for the serum ages very slowly. Both Kuafu and Abacus first suspect that the sample might belong to Yi, considering he was experimented on by Eigong. However, tests reveal this is not the case. If you recall, after killing Ji, some of his hair was collected, and he fits the description of someone who does not age. After testing the hair, it confirms a positive match with Ji's genetic sequence. With this knowledge, Kuafu and Abacus design a super mutant buster, a special device that can destroy mutants with a talisman explosion. Now armed with a device capable of dealing with mutants, we finally gain access to the game's final area, the Yanlao Research Center. Just as one might expect, this area is teeming with mutants of all shapes and sizes. The entire laboratory is filled with tumors that block your entry to the main lab. To gain the access, you must drop a giant chandelier that is held up by 3 small mutants. After dropping the chandelier, you gain access to the platform elevator that descends into the deepest parts of New Kunlun, where Patient Zero was created that ignited this pandemic. Here you find Eigong's logs spanning many years. They document everything from the initial discovery of Tianhao to experiments on Yi and Ji, the creation of the serum, and her eventual descent into madness. As you go through all the logs, you will eventually stumble upon Eigong's vital sanctum, where she has been hiding and waiting for Yi with a plan to trap him and steal all the souls he has collected so far. Once she has taken all of your souls, she leaves you trapped in her vital sanctum. In the midst of his despair, all of his memories return, revealing the past and tribulations of Yi, the soul of invention. Throughout the game up until now, Yi has been receiving messages from his sister that reveal parts of his past. Throughout their youth, the young pair were inseparable, despite their differences in beliefs. Unlike Yi, his sister Heng was a pure Taoist, and from a very young age she had a close connection with the mystical Fuxi, even being able to hear the singing of the roots. Despite not being a futurist like Yi, she still enjoyed spending a lot of time with her brother and asking him about all kinds of things. Though she was not as skilled as Yi with technology, she still wanted to help her brother in any way possible. One day, during a mystic nymph experiment, a disaster strikes. The rhizomatic energy overloaded the system and exploded in front of the siblings. Yi instinctively reacts, protecting his sister at the cost of his own life. But thanks to Heng's deep connection with the Fuxi, Yi's body was luckily saved. At this point, the Tianhao outbreak has already started, and Yi joins Eigong as a scientist. In the midst of this pandemic, Yi offers his parents to come with him to live in New Kunlun, but they refuse. Not wanting to live in a place so devoid of Taoism, they would rather prefer to die on Penglai, but Yi won't let that happen. He promises that when he returns next time, he would save his family. Some time has passed, and when Yi returns to see Heng, the Tianhao virus has already spread throughout Penglai, and both of their parents had succumbed to the virus. Heng did not mourn them for long. For her, the virus was just a way for Solarians to return to the ground from which they had been taking resources for far too long. Yi could not stand his sister's ridiculous beliefs and promises her that she would not end up like their parents, that she will come and live with him in New Kunlun and be saved from this fate. But when the time for New Kunlun's departure came, Heng refused to come with her brother due to her Taoist beliefs. Yi felt hurt and betrayed by her decision, because all of his efforts were just to save her. He told her that he would come and visit her one last time, and if she still intended to stay on Penglai by then, he would consider that he never had a sister in the first place. However, Yi never came back to visit his sister. Even if she had changed her mind and wanted to come with him, he never came back to find out. Despite this, she did not blame him, as they had simply decided to follow different paths in life. With this revelation, Yi gives up on waking up and plummets into a deep sleep. But all of a sudden, a voice of Xuan wakes him up. While Yi was trapped in Eigong's vital sanctum, the Four-Season Pavilion was attacked. Yi quickly rushes out, only to find that Eigong has blocked most of the exits from the laboratory. However, conveniently, she forgot to block the most challenging one, which requires navigating through the most guarded area where she kept all her mutated experiments. Once you get back to the entrance of the main facility, you encounter Shanghai 9000 near a pod containing a mutant. Throughout the game, he has mentioned several times he is looking for a friend, and the coordinates of that friend are within this containment chamber. When he opens the chamber, the mutant bursts out, killing the robot. After you kill the mutant, you find a photo of a Solarian child hugging Shanghai 9000. More about their relationship is shown in the official comic, which depicts the life of Xian the Solarian and Shanghai 9000 in the middle of the pandemic. By the end of the comic, Shanghai 9000 is broken, which explains why he was damaged when Yi finds him in the Four-Season Pavilion. As you traverse ever closer to escaping the Tiandao Research Center, near the top you will find another familiar face, Shio the Merchant. Even with all the weapons you provided at his disposal, he has lost the fight with his brother, now wounded so badly that not even his species could survive such blows. But before death, he is given one last gift from Yi. Yi offers to kill Xintian for Shio as his dying wish. Xintian, now looking way different than before, is depicted more accurately to Chinese mythologies. Xintian, who is a deity who fights against supreme divinity, also depicted as a being with a giant head on his torso. As for the boss's mechanics, it nearly has the same moveset as before. Now mutants spawn from time to time, and Xintian's healing powers are upgraded. After dealing with him and fulfilling Shio's final request, Yi finally escapes the Yanlao Research Center. Without wasting a moment more, Yi heads back to the pavilion, determined to protect it from the impending danger. Once you arrive at the pavilion, it is shrouded in darkness and destroyed. Fortunately, most of the residents of the pavilion are unharmed, with only major casualty being Abacus. Xuan and Kuafu were safe in the panic room when Eigong arrived, so they escape unharmed. But Eigong managed to get her hands on Yi's soul, the only soul she was missing to get the council code. Abacus shuts down and the time is running out as Eigong prepares to do something terrible, so it's time to make some big decisions. You talk to Kuafu and have to choose one of the following, determining the ending of the game. You can either choose to help the ape men survive or help the Solarians. This choice also mirrors Yi's actions. If you decided to help the Solarians, it means you are still one and the same. You still believe science can save the Solarian race. But if you choose to save the ape men, you embrace Taoism and uphold your sister's words, accepting that the Solarian race has outlived its expectancy with technology and now it's time for one race to end. However, this decision is meaningless if you can't kill Eigong, but Kuafu has a solution for that. The rhizomatic bomb. Kuafu has now turned it into one-time use arrow, as the activation of the rhizomatic bomb can destroy the entire New Kunlun. That would mean killing everyone here, so Kuafu and Yi devise a plan to take all the ape men back to their original world, the pale blue planet. You and Kuafu help the ape men board the spaceship, but Yi overlooked one important detail. None of the ape men can drive the spaceship, so Kuafu will have to leave together with them. Xuan, still determined to stay with Yi, refuses to go. He wants to stay no matter the danger. To comfort Xuan, Yi gives his mystical nymph and promises that he will come back and pick it up once this is done. Xuan begrudgingly accepts this and boards the ship. After the ape men left, Yi receives one last message from Heng. Until now, it has been quite strange that whenever Yi receives messages from Heng, he did not respond, unlike when he got them from Abacus or Kuafu. And here it is revealed why. The messages he has been receiving have traveled from Penglai for hundreds of years to reach him. The final message is also Heng's death message, as by this point she has contracted Tianhao virus and will shortly die. She mostly just reminisces about the past and wonders how her brother is doing in this message, which leaves Yi feeling sad and guilty for not coming back to her back then. But there is nothing he can do now. With a clear mind and a heavy heart, Yi prepares for the final confrontation with Eigong, knowing the fate of both Solarians and the ape men rests on his shoulders. Yi enters the council's meeting place, where he has been bested once before, but this time he is prepared. You meet Eigong in the heart of the Eternal Cauldron. Here Eigong reveals her plan to transform every Solarian into a mutant and devour the primordial roots. Yi can let this atrocity happen, and confronts her once again, just like he did 500 years ago. Finally, you can have your revenge, but that revenge will not be obtained easily. Eigong is hands down the most difficult boss in any 2D game I have ever played. She is the fastest boss in the game, with a health bar reminiscent of the Dark Souls bosses. On top of having a ridiculously high health bar, she is also one of the 2 3-phase bosses in the game, depending on what your choice was with Kuafu. And with each phase she becomes more aggressive and gains more new moves. As a final boss, they couldn't have done it more perfectly. Now that we've reached the climax of the game, let's take a moment to critique the overall experience while enjoying my suffering against Eigong. One of the most noticeable issues is the lack of enemy variety. While it might make sense from the lore perspective, the repetition of enemy types can make combat feel monotonous at times. Additionally, the game's narrative, though compelling, is heavily reliant on dialogue. This can sometimes feel overwhelming and unnecessary, especially since the game features a beautifully crafted world that tells a story on its own. Another concern is how the resolution of character storylines feels crammed into the last 10 minutes of the game. In my unprofessional opinion, Heng's storyline, for example, could have benefited from more interaction between Yi and his sister. If Yi had communicated with her through the messages, it would have added depth into their relationship. Although it might have seemed odd at times, it would have made the reveal of Hang's death far more impactful. By interacting with her even posthumously, it would have highlighted that Yi never truly got over her death, adding a layer of emotional complexity. Despite these issues, Nine Souls has so much going for it that these flaws become minor in comparison. The game's art style is nothing short of spectacular, with beautifully crafted visuals that create an immersive and aesthetically pleasing environment. These areas tell their own stories, contributing significantly to the game's soft world building. Even though most bosses are relatively easy, they are still well designed and memorable, each with their own unique look and feel to them. But where Nine Souls truly excels is in its combat system, which is executed flawlessly. It's responsive, engaging, and incredibly satisfying. The mechanics are well balanced, allowing for a smooth and enjoyable combat experience that stands out as the game's strongest feature. Amidst the sea of Hollow Knight copies that emerged after its success, it's truly refreshing to find a game that nearly matches Hollow Knight's level while offering such distinct mechanics and visuals. As a whole, I would give Nine Souls a 8.5 out of 10. It's a game that I can confidently recommend to anyone who is a fan of the genre. But before we wrap up, let's talk about the two endings that Nine Souls offers. Firstly, the quote-unquote bad ending. If you didn't help the ape man and decided that you would rather save the Solarians, you will not receive the rhizomatic arrow, and the fight with Eigong is shorter, now only having 2 phases. After defeating Eigong, she dies and he receives the council code with which he returns New Kunlun to Penglai, where he will prolong the life of Solarians within the vital sanctums. Upon returning to Penglai, we see Yi praying at what we can only assume is his sister's grave, as we saw her there earlier in the game. The ape men also accompany Yi to Penglai, where they assist him in sustaining the sanctums. The ending concludes with Yi playing Qian-kun with an ape man child as he is being given a report. The other ending, the so-called true ending, plays out quite differently. In this version, Eigong gains a 3rd phase where she absorbs the mutation deeper into herself, granting her even more power and resulting in this crazy move. After you defeat Eigong, instead of dying, she teleports to the core of the Eternal Cauldron project and uses her own blood to infect the primordial roots with Yanlao. As her blood seeps ever so deeper into the core, the infection spreads within seconds throughout all of New Kunlun. In the midst of this, he receives one last call from Kuafu, who informs him that he and Xuan are safely away from New Kunlun. Now, with the primordial roots infected, Yi has only one option left, to detonate the rhizomatic bomb, which will destroy New Kunlun, but also lead to his own death. Yi speaks to Xuan one last time, telling him that he won't be able to come for him after all. Amidst Xuan's tears, Yi imparts one final lesson onto him, echoing the words of his sister Hang. Crying over death is unnecessary, because life and death are one. When the end comes, we'll just return to heaven and earth. And with a heavy heart, Yi says his final goodbye and faces the increasingly mutating virus. He draws his bow, charges one last arrow, and as his life flashes before his eyes, he sees his sister one last time before detonating the rhizomatic bomb, destroying the virus and himself once and for all. After this, the credits start, and after the credits, we get one last scene. Kuafu has successfully brought the ape men to the pale blue planet. Thanks to Yi's sacrifice and the destruction of New Kunlun, the planet begins to thaw after 500 years of ice age, with sunlight finally reaching its surface. The game ends with Kuafu and the ape men gazing upon the sun. To all of you that have stayed until the end, I thank you very much. This was my first large project, and I hope you enjoyed this journey throughout one of my new favorite games. I know it's a lengthy video, and it's not one of the best videos out there. I know it has its flaws, and I ask you to leave the comments if you found any problems with the video, if you found any misspellings, if you found any editing errors, because I'm still new to this, and I'm always trying to improve. So, once again, thank you, and until next time, goodbye.